So our next step then after this is, I want to show you just kind of some tips and tricks about hatch patterns, namely that earth pattern that's at the bottom. When you look at it, it's kind of thick and overpowering. And then also I want to show you how to use, I'll show you some colors, but we're not going to need to use colors very much, at least not in this class, but you'll know how to use it. And then transparencies. So transparencies can be a little bit funny, but I'll show you that right now. So to start off with item number one, as I've just described, is the hatch pattern here for the earth, right? That earth hatch pattern feels very heavy, very, very heavy. If I'm going to go over to this drawing, you'll notice that, for instance, right here, that I imagine that that's probably a curved wall. And so wherever the curved wall is most perpendicular to the viewing plane, it's dark. And then as it moves away and becomes more, parallel to the viewing plane, right? So like this, right there, it's probably going straight back. And then it curves away and it becomes parallel, right? So that's just use of a grayscale to show depth. But you can use the grayscale to alleviate the senses, your visual sensory, from stuff that you don't want to prioritize. So for me, I'm looking at this drawing and I'm like, wow, that is, my eye just goes straight to that hatch pattern. Yeah, exactly. It's way too noticeable. It's not what I want people to focus on when they look at my drawing. So I can change that to a gray pattern as well. So if you want to, you can just change it to the same color as the hatch.
Maybe make it lighter.
Yeah, what?
Make it lighter to make it less notable.
Right, yeah, you make it lighter. There are two things you can do. You can change the hatch pattern's density, but typically, these things have some standards. And so that's kind of like, you don't want to go too much bigger than that, or it's going to look funny. Or you can make it lighter, right? So you can make it a gray, you can make it transparent if it's a solid hatch. But to make it gray, my thoughts on best practices would be go to the page setup manager and change and create another color specifically for your hatches. So, if I'm going to use, color 10 for my building hatch, if I want to change the value of that hue or that lightness of that hatch and not change the earth, I need to have it on two separate layers. So I'll use color 11 for that. And then this one I'll go and say select color, and I'll make it something a little bit lighter. Well, actually it's going to be probably about the same, but I want it to be independent. Same close, hit OK, close it. Back to layer properties. Then I go to earth, and I change that to color 11. Nope. So now that's much better, right? You know that it's sitting on earth. It's just a hint of a pattern that sits below it, but really the only thing that your eye is really drawn to here is the building itself. You guys following? Make sense? So after that, the only thing left that I think is going to be super beneficial to you is to understand the actual like actually using a transparency, right? So if I was to create a layer, and I'm going to call this one interior shade. So let's say I'm doing a program diagram or a sectional diagram of this building and saying, okay, well, I have interior space versus exterior space. And I just want to show how much of this building is actually interior and how much of it is on the outside and is open to fresh air. So I created interior shade, and I'm going to assign it a color here of, I'll use, I guess I'll just use 20. All right. So I'll play around with the settings of it later, but I go into model space and I say, all right, I'm looking at this thing. I'm going to go to interior shade, and I'm going to draw a polyline that bounds the entire interior volume. And I'm going to stop it at each level. That's important. Like that. And I'll draw another one here, and I'll just bring it right up to this glass line that I made. All right. Then I'm going to hatch with a solid hatch, except this time I'm going to select those objects, right? So I'm going to do select rather than pick points, because if you pick points, then you have to go through and you have to select each of these little volumes in there. Did I explain that to you guys before? No, I just did pick points from. Okay, so if I want to fill the whole space, I drew that polyline because if I'm going to do pick points, then I have to go through and say, all right, here, here, and there, and here, and that's annoying. I don't want to do that. So I did the polyline because then when I do my hatch, I just go to select, solid, and then I select that polyline that I just made. Then I also select the other polyline and hit enter. So right now, it looks like a mess.
Yes.
And when it prints, it'll still look like a mess because it's going to show up black, and you're just going to have this big black shade across it. I need to show you two separate things. You'll need to see and understand how to change the visibility of it in the actual model space and show it as transparent. Or you could send to back, but that's not really ideal. And then how to change it on the sheet. So if I select this hatch pattern and I type in properties, or if your properties window is already open, I usually anchor it on the side like this. The properties has a transparency setting by layer. Oh wait, sorry. Yeah, it's up here. So this hatch transparency, you can change that. So if I only want it to be 10%, 10% transparent, then you can see that it's starting to lighten up. Or if I only want it to be, very, very slightly there, so I know there is a shade, but I barely want to see it, I can change it to 90. So that shade is there, it's changed to 90, all is well. You can get rid of those, you can get rid of the boundary lines if you'd like. And so, you look at it on screen and all looks well and, la-di-da, it's great. It's got a little hatch. I go to plot and I go to preview and then it shows up black. So the reason it's showing up black is because you set it to the color 20 and the color 20 still is set up to print black. So what you can do is change this to plot transparency. This is one of your first, plot options that you're going to modify, is to allow it to plot transparency. And then you hit preview, and you'll see that it's transparent. It's still black, but it's transparent. So it shows up as a gray. That's your other option for showing a gray scale. Okay, so the other thing then that I want to show you, just to kind of complete all the graphics, options here that you have at your disposal, is to say, all right, well, what if I want to show first floor versus second floor in a blue? I want to show first floor as a slightly darker blue than the second floor. Sorry, not that. Escape. So what you have to do is create two layers. So you need to show a layer for shade 1 and then shade 2. Right now I just have interior shade, so I'll just change that to shade 1. Shade 1. and I'll create a new one for shade 2. And instead of 20 for that one, I'll change it to 21. Where's 21? There it is, 21. So here, my hatch is no longer correct. I actually probably should not have deleted those lines. But if you go to a hatch pattern and you select it, if you want to remove one of your selections, it's up here in the top left for remove. And then you just select the boundary line of that section that you're trying to remove. And it still shows up there. You can really barely see that here, so I'm going to change this to something you can kind of see. There, you can kind of see that, right? All right, so that's one of them. When I switch over to shade 2, I then need to, well, now I need to redraw the polyline, which is annoying. That was a mistake. I'll do another hatch. It is solid right here. Select that, change the transparency. So now that you see that you've got two transparencies, they're two different layers because they look a little different. And I have to go into the settings and change the color, right? So they are transparent. I need to go to Page Setup Manager, modify, and I'll change my plot style settings to say, all right, color. And actually, you know, I like to try and keep my colorization as kind of close to the colors I choose. So I'm going to say color 140. And I'll change that to blue. Save and close. Oh, shoot, I need to change the next one too. So that was color 140 and 141. And I'll change that to something that is mostly blue, but lighter. Or I could just change the transparency value. That's what I'll do. That was a silly thing. I'll just make them both 140 actually. And I'll change the other one's transparency value. So I don't even need two layers. In fact, I only need one. Let's see. Layer properties. Where are we? Shade 1. Change to 140. Hit OK. I'll just leave it at shade 2 and put it on 140. But I've got one of these set at transparency 20. No, sorry, 80 it'll have to be. And the other one's set at transparency 10. I mean 90. I always have that backwards. So you can see that they're slightly different there. When I go to plot and then preview, oh, still showing up blue. Plot transparency. There you go. Okay, so you know, when all is said and done, you don't really have to do too much in order to get something that I think is, you know, getting to be visually stunning, right? A couple of grays, you might have a color accent or two, and then you've got something that's very, very sharp. So what we need to get to for our assignment, right? So we did our catalog of 6 options that we just folded, rapid prototyping. We analyzed 2 of them in the roof plan view, and they were just planar. We hadn't created thickness yet. So we need 2 roof plan view sheets. And then the last sheet is essentially this. You'll take your building. You won't have quite as interesting of a, you know, slope on the site or anything like that. But you'll take your building, you'll create thickness like we've done here, and then you'll cut it, and you'll look at it inside. So what I do want to see is that you've created a slab, and you've shown the slab in black. Then you have hatched in gray the fill or poche to the walls of your building. And then I want to see, I don't care if it's a color or if it's just a grayscale transparency inside, I want to see a fill inside. Very, very light fill, wherever there's interior space. What questions do you have?
Was that in video?
Oh yeah, yeah, that's in the video.
I was gonna ask the same thing.
Yeah. So I'll recap now that I'm closer to the microphone. I want to see that you, actually I kind of want to see the earth hatch too. So put an earth hatch on there. I want to see a black foundation, black poche foundation. Then I want to see a gray hatched wall in gray. And then I don't care if you do color or if you just do kind of a gray interior, but I do want to see an interior transparent hatch inside the building. And you won't have as much detail here. You might have a wall. You know, you'll see the line of a wall or something like that. It won't be much, but I think you get the picture. All right.